All across the front page is your Conservative colleague Boris Johnson, who's urging the Cabinet to mutiny. You're all about loyalty. Is he right?
Well, he's absolutely spot on. I wouldn't use the word mutiny. The way we're governed is cabinet government. So it's not the cabinet mutinying, it's asserting its historic right.
To use his word, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. But
I would clarify for the listener. He uses the word mutiny.
I wouldn't choose to use the word mutiny because I think this is how cabinet government works. Sometimes we get the idea that the Prime Minister is a president and can issue diktats and so on. It's not the way it works. Any policy has to be agreed by the Cabinet, and the Cabinet should assert its authority and say that everything we've heard about the deal so far simply won't work, won't be accepted in Parliament, and wouldn't actually deliver on Brexit. And it was very interesting that Joseph Johnson, Boris's brother, made very similar criticisms of what's being proposed to the ones people like me make.
Well, he made a very telling comment that it doesn't work for Brexiters, it doesn't leave for Remainers. It works for absolutely nobody, this deal.
I'm afraid that looks to be true, yes. The deal is not a good one. It needs to be revised from beginning to end.
Now, the simple answer to my next question is ask her, but why does she press on with it?
I'm very puzzled by this, that the deal is being proposed, and obviously we don't have the final deal. We've only got leaks and rumours of deals, but they're not authoritatively denied. It doesn't have any support within the Conservative Party. It doesn't seem to have support in the Cabinet. But perhaps even worse, it doesn't match what the Prime Minister said she was trying to do. That if you look at the manifesto, the Lancaster House speech, the Florence speech, all of these are indicating a much cleaner, a different type of Brexit, not the half-in, half-out hokey-cokey that is being proposed currently.
Is it Brino, Brexit in name only, as it's been dubbed?
Well, I don't know if it's even Brino. It's a sort of vassalage. It's becoming a colony of the European Union, a state of servitude.
What do you see, before we go to the calls, Sandra, you're going to be the first caller, what do you see happening over the next 24 to 48 hours for the Prime Minister?
Well, there's supposedly going to be a Cabinet meeting at some point within this time, but the question is what gets presented to that meeting, because if what's being talked about is presented, it's hard to see the Cabinet approving that. But if nothing's presented, then time is beginning to run out, that what is agreed has to pass through Parliament, both in terms of a meaningful vote, but much more importantly in terms of legislation. And legislation takes time, and there's not a lot of time left. So it's hard to predict what will happen in 48 hours. Very often you think something's about to happen and it's delayed further, and this has been characteristic of the government.
Yes.
There have been endless delays in the approach to the negotiations. So probably we come back in 48 hours and still be saying what's going to happen in the next 48 hours because it looks crucial, but we are very close to the crunch point.
And of course supporters are saying that it's the last 5% is always the toughest, and the last 15 minutes of any negotiation is the toughest as well.
Are her supporters. That's a very small and exclusive group on this particular issue, as far as I can tell.
Difficult to find supporters for it at this time, is it?
Well, you tell me. I mean, we'll find out from your callers how many think that this proposal is exciting, workable, and delivers on the referendum result.
Let's go.
Well, I think, to be fair to Mrs May, she is doing the best as she sees it for Britain. I think, unfortunately, she's getting it wrong in this area.
Well, how long do you go on with that, Mr. Because you've always said the policy needs to be changed rather than the person, and I think people respect you for that, but there comes a point, does there not? You've said that the Cabinet needs to show some kind of loyalty and say, up with this we will not put. Does it not also fall to others, Mr. Rees-Mogg?
Well, it will come to the legislation, and it'll be possible to vote against the legislation.
Which you would do currently.
Which I would do currently. If the legislation tries to implement what is being talked about, I would vote against it, and I think it would be very hard for the legislation to get through in the time available.
Where does that leave the Prime Minister?
Well, the Prime Minister does have to look at the choices that face her, whether she wants to follow through with this policy, or whether now is the time to say that there are other options, we need to be looking at those, and go back to what she said about no deal being better than a bad deal, that we could have a clean Brexit on the 29th of March, the world will not end, the sky will not fall in, and then start implementing our own form of Brexit under our own rules and under our own laws. And I think we need some boldness and some leadership to get to that. I don't think we can fall into a clean Brexit by accident.
But if the deal fails, she has to go.
Look, her policy is very much focused on her individually. It doesn't seem to have a great deal of support beyond the Prime Minister herself. And Prime Ministers must take responsibility for the policies that they
I'm going to take
adopt
that
and follow.
as a yes, Mr. Rees-Mogg.
It was a slightly loquacious indication of an opinion.
But I'm going to take that as affirmative. If the deal fails, she fails with it.
Well,
the captain goes down with the ship.
Well, the ship mayn't necessarily go down because there may be an opportunity to move to a clean Brexit. But it will depend.
No credibility.
It will depend on her political ability to move to that position.
And Wade, how do you rate her political ability?
Her political ability sometimes seems very good and sometimes seems less good. This is a less good period.